Hello, welcome to season 4 Transformation Horizon. I am Judy an organizational health strategist and executive coach.
And I'm Sasha Farley, a neuroscience based remote work consultant. In this season, we are changing things up a little bit. We are going to be bringing in our work and also a handful of special guests as we discuss how to integrate human flourishing into the ways that we work. Specifically, we're going to be trying to figure out ways in which we can help both people and organizations thrive together because we believe that those are two mutually achievable goals if we just frame them correctly.
So, join us as we explore our transformation horizon. Okay, Sasha, we're back. Can you believe it? We did it. Oh, I'm so excited. Tell me, let's check in like we always do. It's been a minute. What are you most excited about for season 4 of Transformation Horizon?
Well, first, I'm excited to get to talk to you more regularly. We still kept in touch for our little yearish hiatus, but it's definitely excited to have a reason to keep in touch a little bit more. I love talking to you, Judy. And I'm also really excited to bring in more of the work that we do specifically into the conversations we are having. I loved talking to all the amazing guests that we had and hearing the work that they were doing. And I'm excited to kind of dive deeper into how we've been incorporating human flourishing into our work and the two very different approaches that we have to achieve the same goal in the end. So I'm hoping people can learn a lot from it. And I'm just really excited to bring in the different models that we use and just share useful advice with our listeners so that they can start to also create human flourishing. Because in the end, that's what we want, right? We want this to become something that everybody's doing at all times, everywhere, every day, every second. So super excited about that part of how we're framing season 4. What about you?
Yes, I am also very excited to be talking to you again and recording it because that is very fun. I do love that we are not abandoning our guests. We will still periodically have opportunities to have guests on the podcast, which is always super fun. I think I'm really excited to actually get into the conversations with you about some of these topics. You and I have been chatting periodically over last year when different things would come up in the work that we're doing, some similarities, some things different because we work with different types of organizations. So I'm excited to explore that, share some of the insights that we have learned in doing the work and I think I'm really excited to use this platform venue to share things that'll hopefully be useful for leaders, for organizations out there. Because I think one thing that has been really clear, especially last year, is that there are a lot of organizations still out there who are trying to do good in the world. And it's getting harder and harder to do that. So anything that we can do, anything that I can do to make that work a little bit more easeful, a little bit more clear, a little less stressful, feels like a worthy endeavor. So that's really the goal that I have for this season. That's what I'm trying to do over here. So I'm excited to be doing it with you.
I'm super excited. I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of season 4. Without further ado, we want to just dive into one of the topics we want to be exploring. Today, we're going to be exploring a question that we are all feeling, and I think is probably top of mind for a lot of people based on some recent events that have been happening. It's not just isolated, but it keeps bubbling up. It feels like every couple weeks something else comes up. Basically, the question that we're exploring is when something genuinely hard happens in our lives or in the world in general broadly, what should we realistically expect from our workplaces? Basically, how do healthy organizations balance the empathy with the flexibility needed with performance expectations that businesses need to be able to be successful? So I'm definitely excited to dive in and talk about this. I think it's very relevant and on a lot of people's minds. I know it's been on my mind when I'm trying to sit down do marketing on LinkedIn, and I'm like, is this the right place to put my head right now? How do I
What
put
am
this
I doing?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this question, especially last year, 2025. Whoo, what a year. So glad to see the back end of that. 2026 is looking also not so great, but we're gonna work with it. We're gonna do what we can do. I think this especially in some of the client work that I did last year. So I work with public media. I work with different public media agencies, different stations, etc., helping them. And one client I was working with last year, about mid-year, realized that with all the things going on with the administration, they were about to lose a third of their current year's budget. And it's so great because we were doing strategic planning at the time. So that situation not only created kind of obviously a certain air and a certain energy for the organization in the moment, but also so much uncertainty about the future. And it was a big question of how do we balance supporting our staff right now in this moment of crisis and uncertainty, while we're also trying to actually do work, implement programs, support our community with the work that we do. And then we also have to think about the future. What future? How do I do that? One of the it was a really interesting time to be working with them for sure. And I think the biggest takeaway that we had in that project, and one of the things that I emphasized for them when there is essentially a shitstorm outside, how do you make the inside as stable, as consistent, as predictable as possible? This is an organization, thankfully, they already were starting with a very strong foundation of trust amongst and between staff and management, staff and leadership. There was trust there. So I helped them. I said, okay, if you already have trust, then your main priority is to maintain that trust. You can't necessarily control the external environment, but you can create practices, you can create consistent communication, you can like do things that are so predictable. Just be so predictable as much as you can. So, and what we found was people needed different things at that time. People were worried about their jobs. People were still really dedicated to the mission. They wanted to, many people wanted to come to work and just focus on work because I can do something in that. They wanted to be able to have agency in a time and space where agency was few and far between. It was hard. So I think, like, my, like, big advice, around this for leaders and for organizations that are trying to balance this, find the ways that you can be predictable, find the ways that you can be, like, a steady port in the storm. Some people are definitely going to wanna just keep working. Other people are going to need space and time to kind of deal with and just acknowledge the craziness, but they don't necessarily wanna stay there, neither do you. So, how do you create that flexibility? It's unfortunately, there is no one magic answer that, like, just magic silver bullet that you can do and it'll be perfect, but it's a place to start. Let me pause. Sasha, talk to me about this question. I know that you've also been seeing a lot around this.
Yeah, and I think an important piece of how I'd summarize what I hear you saying is like focus on your locus of control, right? So that part of everything that you have control over and make as much of that stable and certain as possible while the rest of it kind of churns around. So people have this place of certainty. From my background, which is a neuroscience background, I'm always using our different key needs of our brain to align how I think about things. And certainty is definitely one of our key needs. So I think grounding in that makes a bunch of sense. I've seen that in a number of my clients as well, facing similar large scale budget cuts and organizational challenges. I want to add on what you're saying with an element that is also I think is important when we talk about these really heavy experiences happening in our lives and in the world. The point that I want to talk about is that our brains are emotional first and then logical second. I say this all the time, but it is 100% true. And so pretending like we are logical first and emotional second is a great way to create a lot of issues and lead to unexpected responses from people who are being asked to bury our emotional responses that we are definitely having and honestly leading with. And so, some work that I've done with some clients around that to help them really focus and give the space for the emotional processing so that the logical brain can start to come through, in addition to doing some of what you talked about in terms of creating certainty, which can help the brain hold on to something and have a little bit less of the emotional responses. But it's also important to create space to have the conversations about what you're feeling.
Mhm.
So with one of my clients, we were doing an in-person facilitation to help them develop their strategic plan. and align with a new leader. And right before that was when a lot of some of these changes happened. And there was a lot of emotions that were coming into the room with decreased budgets, people getting laid off, all sorts of changes. So when we started the conversation of the in person, instead of diving into our regularly scheduled program, I actually pushed, and the leader is a very emotionally aware leader. So she was definitely supportive of this, of creating literally unending time, which not a lot of leaders would commit to when you're in an in-person, to talk about and let people surface any of the emotions that they were feeling in the moment so that we could get them out. We could process them together as a team, share as much as you wanted to. Basically, I always do check-in questions when I do stuff that kind of help people ground it. A lot of times they're really simple, they're really fast, they're light. This one was a little bit more open-ended. And basically the question that we asked was, we're giving you the space as much or as little as you want. You can pass if you want to pass. We're not forcing anyone to have conversations, but we want to give you the space to share how you're feeling right now in this moment as we are coming in today. And there is no time limit for this session. So we were very clear about that. And we did this because the team already had some level of trust and you could feel the energy in the room. And so people were just able to talk about it. They shared their emotions, they shared what they were scared of. And naturally, what ended up happening through that conversation is they shifted themselves as a group into what they were excited about and what they wanted and the possibilities within all of that. Because one thing that's interesting with our brain is when we start to vocalize and say and label emotions that we are feeling, it actually helps our brain look at them more objectively and feel them less intensely. So by having and giving a space for people to do that, it was able to let it out, process it together supportively, and then move forward in a really productive way for the rest of the session. And so I just kind of encourage people to really think about that, creating spaces for people to express their emotions and not be scared of what that might look like in workplaces because we were feeling them, whether we say them or whether we are expressing them or not, and creating spaces for people to start to get under awareness and label them with other people can actually help people feel them less intensely and process them and then be able to then focus on the work that needs to get done. So that's just one element that comes up for me whenever I think about this topic.
I love what you just said about the see, Sasha, when you bring in the brain, everything just starts to make sense and it's so cool. And that actually reminds me of one important thing to think about when you're doing that is it sounds like in that example that you just gave in that group, it was probably mixed, like managers, frontline staff, everybody, leaders all together. For some organizations, that's going to feel really not great. And hey, that's real. That's fine. Like, and especially with the types of hashtag unprecedented nonsense that we're dealing with, that's not always appropriate. So one of the things that I actually did with it was a mixed group. It wasn't in one organization, but we created a manager support circle. And this was specifically so managers and then it was great. It was from different organizations, but you can do this within your organization. Like people at one level, all the managers, all the supervisors, they can come together and have that emotional release because it is true that oftentimes for frontline staffs, like it's not helpful for their emotional space to be receiving and holding your leader's emotions when they're going through it. It's unfair, but hey, that's what power dynamics are.
Very
So
true.
you should not use your staff to as your kind of emotional dumping ground while you're going through uncertainty. That's not cool. It's not helpful. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help them, and it erodes trust.
I love what you said. I think it's so important to hammer that home. And it's a really important distinction as we talk about this. There's a balance in terms of when heavy things happen to us and in the world, there is a power dynamic at play that is relevant in terms of what is acceptable in work environments and what is not acceptable in work environments. And that will be different in every organization and even within every team within different companies and businesses, because it's always sub team cultures matter very much here when you're talking about heavy, emotionally charged concepts and how they interact with how we work in the workplace. And I think it's really important to be aware that as a leader, you have the ability to control how people process some of these things, but then you also have the responsibility to make sure that you aren't creating things that align with your preferences only and your needs only, that you are And it's just a hard thing to do with leaders. And that's why I love the creation of that manager's circle, right? Where maybe you can get it off your chest and process it in there so that you can be in a clear mindset to be able to then think about the larger impacts of your team, your own team dynamics, and what would be beneficial for them. Asking some people within your team that also you have better relationships with can also be helpful sometimes to understand, what do you want in this moment? What do you think the people, what are you hearing that I'm not hearing? Because we always say things to each other that we will never say to leadership. That is guaranteed across every structure, no matter how flat it is accurate. And so understanding a little bit that your perspectives might not be what's happening under the ground. So I really like that call out. And I think that's just relevant across the board in terms of, as a leader, you have to put your own needs aside sometimes to then help the team. But and want to emphasize this a lot, being a manager doesn't mean that your needs don't matter. It just means how you service your needs may not be in a collective team setting as others or as you might want to be because of the outside impact of what that might feel like. And so being aware of those conversations and what they are, and also aware of the trust levels you have already developed, how to develop trust, sharing emotions, I will say, sharing your emotions and sharing your vulnerability, sharing that you don't know what to do at times when things are crazy, sharing that you are also impacted by things happening outside the world, outside in the world and in your own life, can be really important ways to also bond and build trust and connection within your team, but only if you're doing it really consciously instead of unburdening yourself. You are consciously sharing and opening for more connection versus more freedom and taking things off your shoulder to then put it on other people. So I think being aware and emotionally aware in that sense is helpful, and having other leaders to bounce ideas off of can also be helpful. I know that's also not to plug anything, but I know that that is when most of my clients always do like the, "Hey, Sasha, we have to have an ad hoc thing. I need your help for something really quickly." It is usually about these sort of topics because it is something that is weighing on them, something that came up for them, and they're aware that I need help processing this out from someone that isn't feeling this in this moment because I'm not sure I'm going to be making the right decision on my own. So finding whatever that looks like for you can be very helpful.
Yeah. It's definitely about finding this. I wrote about this in a newsletter that I released last year. The first thing you gotta do is get yourself right before you try and help anybody else. And what support do you need to get yourself right? And that can be reaching out to a trusted thought partner, a coach, just someone who has the skill set and the ability to hold the space for you so that you can put these things in order, get your mind together, and be able to actually turn around and be supportive, not just be reactive with your staff, with your company, with your organization, all of that. Sasha, what do we want our listeners to really take away around this question?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about some of the key pieces that are important, and I think one of the big concepts that's coming up for me is the idea of how hard it is to have difficult conversations with yourself and with others, and how easy it is to just, we said you shouldn't react too quickly, but it also can be very easy to wait so long to then process something that it becomes too late to then be helpful or supportive of the person. And I'm thinking about even from like individual perspective, things like someone's dog being sick or dying, right? Or a family member being sick, all the way up to like world events that are happening that are draining people's energies, or people wanting to go off, take off work to go to protests or whatever, like all those sort of things, they all are timely. They all require a certain level of urgency to respond, but not urgency to respond without thinking. And so, one thing that I think about all the time is the concept of just taking a pause and thinking for a second and time boxing how long you're going to think about what you want to do, what opportunities, what possibilities, what options you have, and then saying, I'm going to figure out a way to move forward from there. So you don't say, I'm going to wait, I need to wait some more to figure it out. And 2 days have passed, and then like it's too late to really, or you can still do, but it feels like not very timely. Small things can make big impacts when you're starting to learn and understand and open up the place and ability to be empathetic in the workplace, and to create flexibility. So I would just say, when in doubt, you don't need to create circles where everyone can share all of their emotions like I shared. And just we were all going to be in person, so that's why we did the conversation. If you're virtual, that's probably not necessarily the most helpful tool. But understanding and providing people with flexibility is the easiest thing that you can do when you're just starting out trying to understand how to create this space for people. Offer time for people to take space. In the end, people need space to process any of these big things that are happening for them. So, one of the easiest things as a leader is to, with a slight sense of urgency, right, create space for people. Offer, hey, I know you have some stuff that's due today. I want you to know, like, it's okay. It's actually, you can get it to me tomorrow by the end of the week. Take a little bit more time to do it if it's possible. Like, really ask yourself, are the things that are on this person's plate actually needed right now? If they aren't, give people space and be like, hey, it's okay. Take a little bit more time. I know you're not going to be really in the mental headspace. Same sort of things also. I've had like leaders literally give people time off. They're just like, I will give you time off for this. Like, go to the dog's funeral. I know you don't have any more PTO. Go to your dog's funeral. Here it is. Sending cards. Anything that shows that you care about the person and actually helping them be in their workspace is important because, as I said, you're emotional first and logical second. If someone is emotionally responsive to something and you force them to work, the work is gonna be shit. And I know I curse, but it's true. It will literally that's it's a guarantee.
We
I
can
can
curse on this
guarantee you. Hell, I know. I just said it. We established a new precedent.
podcast.
But it will be. And so understanding that as a leader that you can't push people through really heavy emotions. So you might as well give them space so that they can understand that you care about them and so that when they are ready they are able to give you good work because in the end we want people to meet our expectations of performance and you cannot do that if you are mentally exhausted and drained from a bunch of different negative emotions that are going on in your world. So give people space to process them so that they can then actually give you the work that you need. I don't know if that was 1, 2, or 5 different nuggets, but that was the that was the thing that kinda came up for me when I was thinking about this.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think I'm thinking back on the original question and like the second part of it was how do healthy organizations balance empathy and flexibility with performance expectations? And I like thinking about that, like how do healthy organizations do this? I would say key takeaway that I want you to remember, if you want to have a healthy organization, then you will plan for this. You will have practices for this. It Let me tell you, it's not gonna be a surprise that unexpected, big, heavy things are gonna happen in 2026 and beyond. That's not a surprise. So how about we plan for that? So what does that look like? That looks like, again, like I said, the consistency, the practices, having a standing manager circle where the managers can come together. That can be a venue. It's not a brand new thing. Because again, remember when you pop up brand new things, that's uncertainty. What are we doing? Why are we doing that? How can you make that part of your normal mode of operating as an organization that there are spaces, there are venues where people can come together, talk through and process some of the emotional pieces, support each other. That's one of the things that was really important about that manager circle. It wasn't just a bitch fest. It wasn't just a let me dump all the emotional stuff that I'm feeling. It was a whew, let me exhale with a group of people that it is appropriate to exhale with and hear what challenges that they're facing and share my ideas with them. Support each other in you're dealing with this with your team. Here's some ideas. Here's some different ways to think about it. Helping each other find agency in solving these issues. And I think that's the other thing that's really important here. It's you mentioned it, locus of control. So there are going to be different big, heavy challenges that staff, leaders, people in organizations are going to face that are kind of micro in their micro locus of control. It might be related to their family or their friends or like their community. But we're also dealing constantly with things that are super heavy that really do have an impact on us that are big, macro, especially in January of this year. Big macro things. I can't necessarily do anything about those, but they will definitely impact how I show up at work. They will definitely impact how I'm able to function, just all these things. So, how can you balance empathy and flexibility with performance expectations around things that are both in people's locus of control and they can do something about, and things that are not in their locus of control? For healthy organization, it's gonna be not number 1, not being surprised that people are impacted by this stuff, and therefore having practices already in place, venues, spaces, ways that you can acknowledge. I think especially with things that are happening in the world that are impacting all of us, but we as individuals don't necessarily have the power to change. Having your organization, your leadership, your manager acknowledge it goes a long way. It's like you said, when we acknowledge, when we name the emotions, we can process it a little bit differently and move forward. So that if there's one thing that you take away from this, acknowledge it.
Yeah,
Don't
and to
ignore it.
exactly. And to take that and add like a really specific example of how you can do that is I did that with the consulting firm I used to work with when we had a bunch of these larger macro level world things that weren't within anyone's control. We created a system where anybody could ask for us to create a space day of, like it was literally like it was always in the lunchtime that day of, or the next day, depending on when it happened, for us to talk about it, and it was a space where anyone could attend. It was an open space, and one of the leaders would prioritize being there to help hold the space, hear what people were sharing, recognize what conversations people wanted to have, and to help ensure that conversations were I don't wanna say positive because no one ever came with the intent to go crazy, but we had, heavy conversations that happen sometimes in some of these, topics because people wanted to bring it up and people were asking and trying to understand and just trying to get to understand sure and talk about them, and that was scary for the organization to do, but having it really helped a number of people, and I wouldn't say that, like, 50 people showed up, 4 or 5 people showed up to each one that they did, but they were the ones who really needed to talk it through or really wanted to hear what people were saying within the workplace. So it can be really simple and structured like that, just showing leadership support and just creating the space for people to have the conversations they need to have. We shy away from it a lot, but shying away from it then shows that it's this dirty little thing that we shouldn't be feeling, we shouldn't be experiencing. That's not relevant here. It's something that is distracting you. And that is what I think creates the most challenges within teams. I think if your organization feels that way, that that is something that is scary to talk about, that's a good sign you need to spend some time thinking about how you are opening up the spaces for people to be human and emotional within your systems. And so that's just one thing. As I said, they're all emotional first and logical second, so you can ignore it, but it's there. With that, that's going to end our episode. You'll notice this one's shorter than ours normally are. That's because we're trying to start something new, give you guys little bite-sized little thingies. We'll see how you guys like it. We hope you enjoyed the episode of Transformation Horizon. And if you did, please share it with anyone who you think would be interested in what we talked about today.
Yeah, and please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. Please leave a review. All those things are super helpful. Also, if you have any questions that you would like us to answer, similar to this one that we just answered today, send them to transformationhorizon@gmail.com. With that,
Bye, Judy.
bye.